In this tutorial, we will take a closer look at how you can customize your splitter schemes. To get started, open up the Rules and Materials section. Note that splitters are only placed on PON-type networks. In order to enable the splitter settings, switch the technology to anything including PON. Notice the table with splitter schemes that has been added. The first row in this table corresponds to the default rule for placing splitters. Right now, we see that no splitters are placed in any of the layers. Let's say we want to place a 1 to 32 splitter in the distribution point. We can simply update the rule by selecting the preferred splitter type in the corresponding layer. The default rule will now add splitters in the distribution point. In some scenarios, you might want to have a separate splitter scheme. For example, in the case of large multi-dwelling units, it could be better to place a splitter directly in the basement of that building. The cables can then connect to a splitter with a smaller ratio in the distribution. Let's implement this rule as an exception to the default case. First of all, add another custom splitter scheme. Let's say we want to place a splitter in the basement when the building needs 4 or more fibers. So the amount of fibers can be seen as the condition to trigger this custom rule. The column in layer refers to the layer where this condition should be checked. For this rule, this would be the demand layer, where the buildings are located. Next, indicate which type of splitter we want to place in the basement, and which type it should connect to in the distribution point. In this case, I used a 1 to 4 and 1 to 8 splitter to ensure the same end-to-end splitter ratio. We can define multiple custom splitter schemes. It's possible to change the layer where the amount of fibers condition has to be checked. If we change it to the drop layer, then the rule will check the amount of fibers of each drop point. Such a rule might be useful if you are doing an aerial design. The drop points in that case correspond to the pole locations. You could want to place some splitters on these pole locations. Let's enter some values for our condition and splitter types. So, as a recap, the goal of this rule would be to place a 1 to 4 splitter on the drop point, which would correspond to the pole location. In the distribution point, the fibers will be spliced onto a 1 to 8 splitter. For the remainder of this demo, let's limit the rules to the default one and the rule for placing basement splitters. Save the changes to the rules material and close this window. Head into the Design view and run a new calculation on the network. First of all, let's hide some of the output layers so our view is less crowded. We can visualize the splitters by going to the Equipment section. Over here, just enable the rendering of the splitters layer. We also want to visualize the home count of our buildings. Now, let's first find a building point with at least 4 homes inside of it, because such a building should have received its own splitter. We can easily do this by sorting the attribute table on the home count and then selecting one. Let's take a closer look at that demand point. Indeed, we should notice that a splitter has been placed on the location of this demand point. We can also verify that it is a 1 to 4 splitter by looking at its type attribute. A similar explanation can be given for this building with 9 homes, which will require 9 fibers. Since each 1 to 4 basement splitter can only produce 4 fibers, a total of 3 splitters will be required. Now, let's check out the splitters in the distribution point associated with these drop points. We'll notice that it has some 1 to 32 splitters, which is used to connect all of the single dwelling demand points. It also has the 1 to 8 splitters that will be used to connect those drop points with a large home count. This concludes the information about customizing the splitter schemes.